department here, and I am delighted to be able to attend this lecture. I've been interested in this topic since for many years. This topic of Archimedes Palimpsest, because only one copy of this material exists, and it gives a way of telling how Archimedes thought. Now, Archimedes was a truly outstanding mathematician. That's an understatement. He more or less invented integration. Not all kinds of integration, but he solved a number of problems. We talk about the Riemann integral, where one estimates an integral from above and below. This is exactly what Archimedes did. He created the idea of estimating quantities above and below with a style where you could imagine getting it arbitrarily close. And so the key point of the Riemann integral seems to be due to Archimedes. And according to the literature, Newton studied Archimedes' work, according to a book by James Gleick on Newton. So that's curious, right? But I will give you a well-known estimate of Archimedes that 3 plus 10 over 71 is less than pi, which is less than 3 plus 1/7. And so you see, he had to estimate this by a complicated series of estimates. The particular thing about the Codex is it is the only place where Archimedes actually says anything about how he thought. And I should tell you that the book by Noel and Netz is an excellent book on this palimpsest. So the New York Times article, 2 days before the palimpsest went on sale in 1998, talks about Archimedes' method of experimenting to determine what happens before he proved theorems. And so Archimedes says, and I would like all graduate students to listen to this and write it down, it is easier to supply the proof when we have previously acquired by this method, experimental method, some knowledge of the questions than it is to find it without any previous knowledge. I see graduate students working on problems where a little bit of experimenting could tell them this is wrong. Right? So, with that idea, this is the book that talks about it. It's the only book that talks about it, and I don't think it's translated into English in full yet. Is that? Nope. Yeah. Nope. But I should also tell you, I worry about philosophers translating mathematics. So, John.
So before we have our guest speaker tonight, we're thrilled to have you, Noel from the Walters Gallery. This is FFT 2010, and it's been a great conference until now. I suppose who've been in attendance, I think, will agree. And the price you have to pay is you have to hear a little bit about the Weiner Center. On the other hand, we think it is a great center. We think it has a tremendous amount to offer to mathematics and to applied mathematics and to harmonic analysis and to the Department of Mathematics at the University of Maryland. Cass was getting this up. Could you shut the light over here, Emily, please? So the Norbert Weiner Center is now 5 years old, and We named it after Norbert Wiener because of exactly the spirit of this conference. Namely, Norbert Wiener was a great pure mathematician, who was also a great applied mathematician, and who really understood the interaction of productivity in both areas by their mutual interleaving and response to each other. Our goals are threefold. We pride ourselves, and hopefully it's true, in being a state-of-the-art research center. We are launching a financial mathematics program with the business school in the fall of 2011. And we are an international center of harmonic analysis in ways that I'll explain shortly. Our mission is to advance research in mathematical engineering in the 21st century, analogous to the mathematical physics of the 20th century. In fact, for those of you who have been in mathematics programs, you realize that there are usually a host of courses in partial differential equations and numerical analysis and the like. And these are in response to the tremendous strides in 19th century physics and the tremendous importance of having sophisticated mathematics to go along with those strides, and that mathematics is represented by some of the great mathematical centers of the 19th century. Well, in the same way, in the latter part of the 20th century, we saw the rise, I think the golden age even, of signal processing, information theory, and in our opinion, the 21st century will be to mathematics departments replace the developed mathematics associated with the importance of engineering, such as signal processing. Our own projects involve those topics. For the interest of time, I won't read the litany, but they are some of the most central topics and applications, and in the development of pure mathematics because of those applications. This is our present personnel. Besides myself is Chris Shaw, whom is indispensable. As most of you have met him, he does everything. We evolved around the concept of scientific development offices. Dr. Delomo and Dr. Saraki are scientific development officers. They're highly trained applied mathematicians with great knowledge of applications of pure mathematics. Our faculty members, of which we unfortunately just have 3 right now, Radu Balan, Wojtek Shaya, and Kaso Okuju. And we're very fortunate to have 3 great postdocs right now, plus a number of additional associates from government, industry, and university, some of whom are in the audience today. And our webmaster is Alfredo Navarro. As far as our research goes, at the undergraduate level, we sponsor the Daniel Sweet Undergraduate Research Fellowships. Dan Sweet was a great colleague and friend who passed away much too young, and also renowned for his teaching. And we specialize in theoretical and applicable harmonic analysis, and as well as supporting the technologies of the 21st century. One of our goals is to build relationships with industry to provide a forum for interactive problem solving. And some of you are recipients of that activity. I think it's been very, very exciting. Some of the speakers today, without even being prompted, mentioned this interaction. We're very pleased to hear that. Present grants from a host of the most highly respected government agencies. One I don't see there is NIH, but that's also one of our grants that we're very proud of. And we have targeted workshops and internships. Well, we have a state-of-the-art computer lab, and perhaps this is overstating it since it's so hot here today, but this is our state-of-the-art classroom. So. In financial mathematics, as I mentioned, with the Smith School, we're very proud of this association, we are going to be launching a financial mathematics program in the fall of 2011. And besides the home team, Michael Fu and Dov Madan and Alex Triantis, who's fortunate enough that we have him here tonight, we have Peter Carr and Robert Elliott, who are both world-renowned economists, who are not in the list of 11 having destroyed the American economy. You can find that list of 11. I was very nervous when I was checking that out. As an international center, we sponsor conferences. This is our hometown conference, but I want to tell you about another one shortly. We have many, many collaborations, and a news center. If you look at our website, you see everything that's going on in harmonic analysis and its applications. We have 2 book series. The one with Norbert Wiener's name is the Norbert Weiner Center book series. And I encourage you all to look at our website because it really is a font of information. Our advisory boards are, the home team is there, but there are also people who are not on the home team. Our former chair and longtime supporter, Mike Fitzpatrick, and our present chair, Jim York. And as far as folks who are not part of the Maryland team, the National Medal of Science winner, Rafi Koifman, and National Academy of Science member, Ingrid Dobushis, and MacArthur Genius also. And our industrial advisory board has some home team members, but also Greg Coxon from TSC, and Harry Schmidt, and Joe Lawrence, Gary Jason from MITRE, and Fran Sullivan. 3 conferences that I especially want to mention, I'm going to close in just a second. One we are going to sponsor, May 20, 23rd, is to one of the leaders in our field who is catching up with me in age, but he'll never do this, is Pete Casazza, who will be celebrating his 65th birthday. We have a host of visitors coming in who will be the speakers at his conference. And for those who know anything about the theory of frames, he is one of the outstanding people in the theory of frames, and that's Janet as well. Another important conference is in dedication to Dick Whedon. Unfortunately, not for him, maybe not unfortunately, but it's going to be held in Spain, which makes it difficult for some of us to get there. But in small print, that there's a host of world-renowned speakers who will be at the conference, and Dick is one of the outstanding classical analysts. In the spirit of Eli Stein's talk today, that type of mathematics was deep and is going to be with us for many, many years. The last conference I want to mention, we had very, very sad isn't the right word, tragic, the correct word, or even more, when we lost our esteemed colleague Dennis Healy in early September 2009. And he wore several hats, one of which was a pivotal program director at DARPA, and we are hosting a mini symposium in his honor at the SIAM annual meeting this year. And he, of course, was one of the people in the avant-garde of compressive sensing, which is an important area. And I hope those of you who are interested will be able to attend. And that is our hero, Noel Weiner. And now, and that's all I'm going to say. And now I want to introduce our speaker this evening, Will Noel of the Walters Gallery, curator of the Walters Gallery, and the world authority on the Archimedes Palimpsest.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Chris. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be here. Archimedes died, but the siege of Syracuse in Sicily in 212 BC. That's a long time ago. That's before there were books. And he wrote on papyrus scrolls, and he wrote treaties. About 11, possibly 12 extant treaties survived. And these treaties were letters to friends. One treatise he wrote, called The Method of Mechanical Theorems, one letter, he wrote to his mate Eratosthenes in Alexandria. He probably kept a copy of this letter, but he wrote it out, and he put it on a boat, and it made the trip all the way from Syracuse to Alexandria on the Nile Delta. And it made it. Often they didn't, but this one did. And the wind would have been behind the boat. It would have been harder to go the other way. So you have two copies now of the Method of Mechanical Theorems. One in Alexandria and one in Syracuse in Archimedes' basement. The Archimedes one probably got destroyed with Archimedes in 212 BC, so we have one left. And you've got to love this letter, because you still have it. But Archimedes, so the way we have Archimedes surviving today is through copies. Copy after copy after copy. And if that's a disappointment to you, the same is true of the Bible, the same is true of the Quran, the same is true of Homer. The only original text you'll have from the ancient world is in epigraphy. So you're dealing with copies. And the people you have to thank are the largely anonymous medieval monks who copied. And they copied. And they often copied without understanding, which is actually a good thing. All the treatises of Archimedes we know about, basically, and this is almost true, we know because of three books. And very boringly for my story, they're called Codices A, B, and C. And Codex A was lost by an Italian humanist in 1564. And Codex B was lost by the Pope in Viterbo in 1311. And Codex C arrived on my desk on the 19th of January 1998. And I'm going to tell you the story of Codex C. Like Codices A and B, it was written in the 10th century in Constantinople. And actually rather important in the transmission of Archimedes' works were Anthemius of Thales and Isidore of Miletus, who built Hagia Sophia, amongst other things, which is rather nicely made up of spheres and cylinders in the 6th century. And Isidore of Miletus probably did some kind of edition of Archimedes' works. And Constantinople was hugely important in the transmission of ancient texts through the Middle Ages, because it was the one place that survived until 1204 anyway, unmolested by barbarian invasions. Now, although Codices A and B were destroyed, they did their job because people copied Codices A and B before they were destroyed. And the reason that everything we knew about Archimedes until 1906 was because copies of these works, Codices A and B. And that's how you know about sphere and cylinder. That's how you know about floating bodies. That's how you know about the measurement of a circle. But Codex C had two treatises that weren't in Codices A and B. And they are the Method of Mechanical Theorems and a treatise called the Stomachion. And the other thing is that through a sort of a quirk, the Greek version of floating bodies didn't exist. So until 1906, we only knew about floating bodies in Latin. Now, Codex C had a very, very extraordinary history. In the 13th century, sometime in the 13th century, the manuscript was taken apart. So the covers were taken off, all the stitching was undone, and the pages were scraped and scrubbed, and all the Archimedes text was rubbed off. And then they were cut down the middle, and then they were stacked in a corner. Now someone wanted to make a prayer book, but the parchment in the Archimedes manuscript, there wasn't enough parchment for this prayer book. So the person who did this, we don't know who it was, used 7 other books as well. And he scrubbed them off, and he cut them down the middle, and he stacked them in the corner. And he gave them a good shuffle. And then he rotated them 90 degrees, folded them up in the middle, and then he wrote his prayer book text on top of those 7 erased books. Then he reassembled them, turned them into a prayer book. And from the 13th century onwards, Codex C was basically gone. No, not basically gone, just gone. That's what it looks like. That's the only pretty picture you'll see tonight of Codex C. It's not a pretty book. It's nicely out of focus. It took a long time. But it was used as a prayer book, and it spent most of its time at the monastery of St. Sabas, which is about 8 miles east of Bethlehem in the Judean desert. After the book landed on my desk, we went out there actually, and went to see where it was. It was kept up in that tower from the 15th century to the 19th century. It's a beautiful place, and it was used, the prayer book was used, it's got marriage ceremonies, it's got exorcisms on it, it's what to do if you drop a piece of bread into the wine and that sort of thing. And eventually this book travelled, and it ended up in a small little monastery back in Constantinople called the Stomachion of the Holy Sepulchre. And we know that because in 1899 it was catalogued by a guy called Andreas Papadopoulos Keramedes, and it was catalogued as manuscript 355 in this library. Now, Papadopoulos Keramedes wrote very long catalogue entries because he didn't have tenure and he was paid by the page for his work. And after he catalogued all the prayers, he went back and he said, hang on, I can read a bit of the undertext, just a few lines, I can read them. And he wrote down those lines, and he published those as well. And the catalogue was published in 1899. This catalogue came to the attention of a really great guy called Johann Ludwig Heiberg. And Heiberg was the professor of philology at the University of Copenhagen in the early 20th century, a truly great scholar of ancient Greek. And Copenhagen must have been a fantastic place to be, because Niels Bohr was there as well. And he read these 4 lines of the Papadopoulos Keramedes had transcribed, and he said, there's only one person who could have written math like that, and that's Archimedes. Which was a bit of a bore, because he'd just done the complete works of Archimedes. So, first of all, he wrote to the monastery and said, will you send me the book? And the monastery said no. So, in his summer vacation, he went to the book, and he found 2 completely new treatises by Archimedes, and on floating bodies in the original. Foundation of mathematics, you know, for Western civilization. And there it was, if only he could read it. He was only there for 3 months, because then he had to go back and teach his students. Poor guy. And so he did most of his work from photographs. And these were lost until 1999, and we found them in the University of Copenhagen. And you might be reading some text there. The stuff that Heiberg had to read is going this way, 2 columns this way. So it goes down to there, and then it disappears into the gutter. And it doesn't continue there, it disappears somewhere else in the book, and he's got to go and find it. And when he finds it again, it's sort of upside down. And then he's got to go back here and then go back there. It's a real mug to get. The guy did brilliantly. He did absolutely brilliantly. He had nothing more than photographs and a magnifying glass. And he published his work, and the book hit front page news, New York Times, on July the 16th, 1907. Big literary find in Constantinople, Savant discovers books by Archimedes copied around 900. Now, you would have thought that now that you found this book, this is that letter that Archimedes wrote to Eratosthenes. It's the only copy. That it would be safe, right? I mean, it's hit the front page news of the New York Times. I mean, it's safe. Well, the trouble is that the First World War happened. Ataturk founded the modern state of Turkey. This was not a good time to be Greek. This was not a good time to be religious. All the property of the monastery became the property of the state of Turkey. So the monks in the monastery very quietly moved all the manuscripts that they had on a little boat, and all the manuscripts ended up in the National Library of Athens, and they were there by 1938. All of them, except the really important ones. Now, the really important ones somehow fell off the boat, and we don't know how. But they're now all over the world. They're at the Cleveland Museum of Art, they're in the Bibliothèque Nationale, they're in the Bodleian Library, they're at Dumbarton Oaks, they're at the Walters Art Museum, Baltimore. This is manuscript W526, it's a rather lovely gospel book. And most of them ended up in America. The Archimedes manuscript nearly ended up in America too. It was identified as by Bertie Hazelden, who was the curator of the Huntington Library in California. And he's been asked by Professor Willoughby of Chicago to identify a leaf. And in 1932, he identifies it as a leaf from the manuscript that Heiberg saw. So he had the book in his hands in LA in 1932, and Willoughby was thinking of buying it. Unfortunately, Willoughby didn't buy it. It was too much money. So it stayed in a French private collection. And it stayed in a French private collection until October the 28th, 1998. And this is what the book looked like when it came up for auction at Christie's in New York on that day. And I want you to pay attention to this little curve here. You see that curve? Okay. That's the armpit of a goat that was wandering around the fields in Constantinople in around the 13th century. And on the back of this goat is written Archimedes' Method Proposition 14. It's the most important goat in the history of Western mathematics. It's going to recur. The manuscript was sold for $2 million to an anonymous American collector who said at the time that he would make it available to scholarship. Now, $2 million might sound quite a lot of money to you. It's not a lot of money. And there are reasons why it didn't go for a lot of money. I think the most important reason is that scholars didn't think much of the book. They thought an awful lot of Heiberg. And they thought, well, Heiberg is so clever that he would have got out what needed to be got out. So this book is now a relic, but it's not as much research interest. And what's more, it's in such appalling condition now that we'll never find more than Heiberg found. What do I mean by appalling condition? This is the 16th page of the method that Heiberg found in the manuscript. So he's got M16 written up there. It's on its side because Heiberg was reading it like this. I'm trying to read it like this. This is the same page now. Somebody painted a gold forgery on top of that page. One of the pigments in that forgery is phthalocyanine green, only commercially available in Germany after 1938. So it was done after Hazelden had identified the book. It was done knowing that it contained Archimedes' letter to Eratosthenes. I don't know. This is a portrait of the evangelist, and you might see that the actual portrait is copied from that miniature there. Another thing that happened to this book is that it suffered very badly from mold. Now, it's made of animal skin, right? So it's made of stuff your shoes are made of. And parchment is tough. There are two things that can damage it, fire and water. And someone left this in a very damp place for a very long time. This is Heiberg's photograph of the uniquely surviving Stomachion, ST. This is the same page now. I am actually going to try and impress you with some of the photographs we've taken, but we will never be able to read through that hole there. It's actually rather important that we can read through that bit there, but that bit there is gone. So when the book came up for sale, it was a sensation, but everyone knew that the book was a write-off, except for this private American collector, who rather mysteriously remained anonymous. And he left it with me on my desk on the 19th of January, 1999, about 3 months after the sale. And he's a man of few words, this owner. But it was pretty clear that what he wanted us to do was to look after it and to put together an imaging program and to read it. All of which I felt totally capable of doing. I'm extremely clumsy. I can take photographs now that I've got an iPhone, but you know, with the old analog stuff, I couldn't do that. And I can read Latin books, but not read ones, not really. So for the last 10 years, I've been directing a project to try and do that. That's what the book looked like when it arrived on my desk. When it arrived on my desk, we had the press say, you know, wow, and it hit the Washington Post. And in response, I got lots of emails saying that they could help. There was the great-grandson of Rasputin who said it belonged to him. And there was an email, and the one that was useful was an email saying, "Dear Dr. Noel, read with interest your article in the Washington Post. It certainly puts our work into perspective. We here at the National Reconnaissance Office have some kit that might be able to help you, and we have a wide range of experience in the imaging community. So if you'd like to get in touch, please do. If not, good luck with your endeavors. Yours sincerely, Michael D. Toth, National Policy Director, National Reconnaissance Office." Now, I'm a scholar of medieval manuscripts, right? Mainly from Canterbury, mainly from September of 1023. I mean, this was a sort of a new world for me. But anyway, along came Mr. Toth, and here he is. He runs my life now. Here he is at my wedding. And we can't actually, the NRO and the CIA and the NSA, they can't help because it's a private book and we can't spend your tax dollars on this book. We've got many, many more important things to spend your tax dollars on. So Mike works as a volunteer and he's a program manager. And so he does the Gantt charts and he just tells me when to move. I don't look at the Gantt charts. He just says, we've got to that bit, off you go. And he runs the program. So there are three things. There's the conservation, there's the imaging, and the scholarship. And I'm going to talk about them, because of time, I'm going to talk about them sequentially. Although, in fact, what really made the project work, if you think it worked, is the iterative loop between the imagers and the scholars and the conservators. And that was the trick to get right, because scholars of ancient Greek, multispectral imagers and conservators, they speak different languages. So this is Abigail Quant. She's my colleague at the Walters Art Museum. She's the senior conservator of manuscripts and rare books. And she's been looking after the book. This is a very small cross-section. It's the size of a pinprick through the parchment. You can see the Archimedes ink there. It's a stain. This is really wicked because it shows that the collagen, which makes the parchment tough, is degrading. So normally parchment's tough. This parchment isn't tough, it's tissue paper. It's like tissue paper. So this is Archimedes' letter to Eratosthenes and somehow what are you going to do? And there are 178 folios of this, 178 times 2 pages. To image the book, we had to take it apart so that we could read into the gutter and lay it flat. This is the spine of the book, right? Now, medieval books they didn't use glue on the spine. It's a post-medieval practice. And you can see that this glue is in two parts. There's the dark bit here. This is hide glue. This is made up of animal parts. That's all right. You can do that. You can take that off. This is a polyvinyl acetate emulsion. Often used in restoring books, particularly in Europe in the 1960s. It is, in effect, Elmer's wood glue. And this is tougher than the parchment that it's gluing. And so Archimedes' letter of Eratosthenes is going around there and it's got glue on it, and we have to take the glue off. So it took a long time to take the book apart. It actually took 4 years to take the book apart. This is a rare action shot. When you backlit the pages, they look even worse. This is the very first page of the book, which turns out to be rather important, because when we started to take it off, we had a scholar called Rediscovery, more of him later, who had an ultraviolet light, and he read this. It's the first page of the book. And he said, this is floating bodies, and the Heiberg missed it. The Heiberg simply doesn't transcribe this page, you can't see it. And at this point we realised, well actually, maybe Heiberg didn't know the book as well as people do. We still couldn't read it, but we took it off. It's got lots of holes in it because it's the first page of the book. And so it's got, these are bookworm holes. Bookworms don't actually like parchment very much. They like the beech boards in the cover, but they don't have a very good sense of direction. So the first sort of 5 or 6 leaves of any book have lots of wormholes. So Abigail takes the leaves apart, and then she's not actually writing on the leaves here. She's documenting in great detail so she's sort of making disaster maps of each individual page. So these are some of them. A lot of the pages have blue tack on them. Anyone knows what blue tack is from Europe? You use it to stick up your postcards on the wall. It was very badly treated, this book. One of the main problems we had was that because the book had been used for liturgical services, that's say in prayer in monasteries, there was lots of wax from the candles, and that's dirty wax, and imaging through wax is very difficult, so Abigail had to scrape off the wax. Lots of detritus. Lots of glue. Carefully removed. All the fragments are catalogued, and they're arranged by the leaf in which they come from. This is one of the forgeries. There are 4 forgeries like that in the book, and here Abigail is taking away a parchment strip that was attached to that forgery. There it is. But it doesn't actually come from that page, it comes from that page. This is a little tab so that you can get to the forgery easily. It actually comes from there. Some of these fragments are very small, but they might contain Archimedes text. So you document them, you photograph them, and ultimately you image them, and they can have text on them. And once they have text on them, you can put them back where they belong. So most of what Abigail does is actually so microscopic that you can't see it. But this is a rather dramatic example. Here is, you're in a detail right in the gutter of the book, right? And there's prayer book, and you might be able to see some Archimedes text going down there, but it gets stuck. So Abigail mends it. There is a before, there is an after. There is a low-resolution ultraviolet JPEG to bring out the Archimedes text that we sent to our scholar Rediscovery in Stanford, who circled this. He said this is the earliest example of a circle, of a symbol of a circle in the history of Western mathematics. eventually, the leaves are ready for imaging. So now I'm going to talk about the imaging of the book.
How long did it take to get to this?
Well, it took 4 years to take the book apart, so what we did was we imaged 15 of these things every 6 months. So we were imaging before the book was completely taken apart. But it was grim. And in the early years, you know, people were saying, what's happening, what's happening, what's happening? Not much was happening. It was a nightmare. So finding Abigail was easy. Finding the scholars is easy. Finding the images for me was rather difficult. We sent out RFPs all over the place. We got three people in competition, and we made them work together. This is Bill Christens-Barry of Equipoise Imaging. He was working at APL at the time. That's Keith Knox, who now works for the Boeing Corporation in Hawaii. He spends most of his time looking at very small objects in the lower atmosphere that he's not allowed to tell us about, but most of them come from China. And this is Roger Easton, who's Professor of Imaging Science at RIT. And we tried all sorts of experiments. We thought about sticking Archimedes in an MRI machine. We did confocal microscopy to try and get them into gold. But it was obvious that the majority of our techniques were going to be multispectral imaging. And having looked at what the Norbert Weiner Center does these days in terms of image processing, I rather wish that the Norbert Weiner Center had been founded in 1998.
Me too.
So we have the electromagnetic spectrum, right? And we're dealing with wavelengths of light, photons coming in at different wavelengths. I'm going to be concentrating on infrared, ultraviolet, and I'm going to be getting down to very high energy, short wavelengths of X-rays. This is all we can see with the visible eye, because we've either been evolved or intelligently designed to see that little fraction. But cameras can see them all, and they can, and we can see what the cameras can see. If you look at iron gall ink, that is the ink of the palimpsest has a lot of iron in it. Under infrared light, you don't see very much. But under ultraviolet light, you see quite a lot. And so this is the Archimedes text here. And you can see quite a bit there, and it's fading out there. Now, multispectral imaging means different things to different people. So you can take images in different wavebands of light, and you can call it multispectral imaging. But without the image processing, it's not much. I mean, it's the image processing that helps you bring out what you want. It's writing the algorithms with the various different wavebands to bring out what you want. Which was all voodoo to me at the time. But anyway, they came back and they took 5 images and they took out and they processed them. And this is the page that they started with, and that's what they ended up with. And I thought that was pretty fantastic, you know. I thought that was wonderful. But you try and read it, and you can't read a thing. The reasons that you can't read a thing are rather interesting. One is that the spectral signatures of the 2 inks are very similar. So it required a lot of processing, and when you have a lot of processing, you introduce a lot of noise, which is okay if you're looking for cocoa fields in the Amazon rainforest, but it's not so good if you're trying to read 10th century Greek cursive. Another thing is that the resolution wasn't high enough. We were imaging at 300 dpi to imitate the human eye, but actually the scholars would far rather read it at 900 dpi, so we now image at 900 dpi. I think the most interesting reason that this is hopeless is because we thought that what we had to do was to get rid of the prayer book text on top. You don't have to get rid of the prayer book text on top. If any of you know about 19th century letters, then very often, when they run out of paper, they turn it 90 degrees and they write the other way, and very soon you can get used to that. So we'd spent thousands of dollars trying to get rid of the prayer book text on top. Absolutely no point. There's no point in doing that. Or there's a little bit of point, but not much. You can read through the prayer book text as long as the underneath text is is made more visible. So it was that we had to concentrate on. So we went back to the drawing board, and we came up with a simple solution that works for most of the book. This is a tungsten reddish image. And you might very faintly be able to see a circle there for a diagram, which is the Archimedes text. But the Archimedes text has more or less disappeared. This is an ultraviolet fluorescent image. So ultraviolet light is it's beyond the waveband that the human eye can see. But what it does is it energizes the parchment. So light comes in, it energizes the parchment, and the light comes back out of the parchment at a wavelength that we can see, which is blue. But that means that the text is backlit, because the text hasn't been lit up at all. So now you can see the Archimedes text rather more clearly. There are a couple of problems with this ultraviolet light. One is that everything's now exactly the same color, so it's very, very difficult to work out this bag of things. And the other is that it's rather fuzzy light. So it's actually rather difficult to read at the edges. But what you do is you get a blank digital canvas, and you put the red image in the red channel, and you put the blue image in the green and the blue channel. So what's light here and light there will be light in your processed image. And what's dark here and dark there, that's the prayer book text, will be dark in your processed image. And what is light here, but dark here, the Archimedes text, is going to come out in your image. It's going to come out with a red hue, so that you have a nice color contrast between the undertext and the overtext. And that's what we did. We call it our push-button pseudo-color processing technique, and it's not pretty, but it works. And sometimes it works like magic. So we did this for about 4 years, and then in 2007, we did the whole book with a light system that we invented called the Eureka lights. LED lights were one of the interesting things that happened as the project developed is that technology developed. So storage fundamentally transformed my life. LEDs, you can now get them shining brightly at all sorts of different wavelengths, but before you couldn't. And so we can now rather quickly take images in, gosh, I'm amongst mathematicians, I better get it right, 16. This is the armpit of the goat. This is method proposition 14. None of them by themselves you can read, but if you put them together you can read them. And they're not pretty, but they work. And of course you don't read it like that. You zoom in. You zoom in. And you zoom in. And then we got better at it. So, and what I should say is that the diagrams in this manuscript are particularly important because Archimedes taught in diagrams. And these diagrams are the earliest extant diagrams of Archimedes by about 500 years. And for the diagrams, you want to get a sense of the whole thing. And for the whole thing, you do have to take the top text off. So this is the same page, but now with the top text off. And this is the diagram for the last proposition of floating bodies 1. So that works for the majority of the text, but there are some particularly difficult folios, and optical techniques were never going to work for the forgeries. So on April Fool's Day 2004, we had a conference to see who would come up with breadboard solutions for imaging the really difficult pages. And 3 people came up with the same idea. So this is Bob Morton, who works for ConocoPhillips. This is Gene Hall, who's Professor of Chemistry at Rutgers, and this is Uwe Bergman, who's the staff scientist at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center in California. And they all came up with the idea of X-ray fluorescence imaging. So when you go to a dentist, which I did this morning, and an X-ray passes through your tooth like that, you have an emulsion plate at the back, and this emulsion plate is energized by the X-rays that go through, and so what you get is a negative image by the photons that go through. But some of them don't go through. Some of them hit the tooth, right? So this is, let's call it a calcium atom. An X-ray comes in. What it's going to do is hit the tooth, and it knocks an electron off the inner shell of a Bohr atom. And then an electron in the L shell will make a quantum leap to the K shell. And as it does it, it has to shed energy in the form of electromagnetic radiation, and it comes out. And by the time it comes out, this energy has a very particular wavelength that is absolutely a signature of that element, calcium. So if you can capture that wavelength, then you can capture that element. So let's just hope that what we're going to do is find the iron ink on the Archimedes page. Well, we took a leaf to the EDAX people up in New Jersey who have an X-ray tube, and we analysed a bit of Archimedes, and you have a lot of calcium here from the parchment, some other things, some copper, some zinc, some magnesium, but iron. So we can see the iron. The problem is that you have to map the iron, right? It's not enough just to see the map. You've got to get a physical map of the page. And what suddenly looks like a rather small book is a huge area to scan and map. And to do that, you have to go to the Stanford Synchrotron Radiation Laboratory in California. So this was an atom smasher until 1979. Electrons go around that way, positrons go around that way, they meet in the middle, they smash, and you discover the charm quark and the tau lepton, and you get a Nobel Prize. We don't put Archimedes in that beam. But what happens is now they don't use it as an atom smasher, but they send electrons around here at the speed of light, and they're not going in a straight line. So they're going around corners, and as they're going around corners, they have to shed off electromagnetic radiation. They have to shed X-rays, rather like tomatoes going off the top of a lorry around a corner. And this is the most powerful light source in the solar system anyway. Okay, not valid in Kansas as per the Board of Education, November the 8th, 2005. Use of this device or substance may require, imply, and or endorse the existence of one or more of the following: chemistry, evolution, electromagnetism, gravity, mathematics, thermodynamics, education. I'm not giving this talk in Kansas. Okay. So this is a leaf of the Archimedes Palimpsest, and it's going to be slotted down into there. And that is an XY stage. And the beam, which is less than the width of a hair, is coming out here. And we're going to move, we can't move the beam, so we're going to move the leaf. And it's going to take us 17 hours to move the leaf. And the X-rays come out there, and they bounce back, and they come into this detector, and we can set this detector to pick up the elements that we want, in which case principally iron. And what we don't want is gold. And after 17 hours, you can, hey presto, you can read it. I mean, I say hey presto, you can read it. You have to be a nut to try and read this. But there are nuts, because there are people that love Archimedes that much. I mean, Archimedes is that important. And one of the things about this project is that I won't sit here and say to you that our images are absolutely fantastic. I don't really care whether they are or whether they aren't. I mean, the point is that they're just good enough for someone to read what it says. So, all the time that we were doing this project, we were geared towards the end user, which was the academic who was going to transcribe it. And this is one of the academics. His name is Nigel Wilson, a lovely man. He was a fellow of Lincoln College, Oxford, and I've just spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars on getting him extremely detailed computer images. So here I am, I'm introducing Nigel Wilson to a computer. He thinks it's fascinating. But actually what he's going to do is read the printouts. And those of you that are interested between computer colour and printout colours knows that this is completely nutty. I mean, it's not nutty of Nigel Wilson, it's just a nutty thing. That actually he's reading from printouts. And he mostly reads from printouts. For particularly difficult problems, he will get his wife to open the email attachments and have a look at the image. This is Rediscovery, who's Professor of Ancient Science at Stanford University, who's much more at ease with computers. And here's the armpit of the goat. This is Archimedes' method proposition 14. This is an early, not very good ultraviolet picture, and Reviel has written what he thinks he can see. And here he is guessing. And here is a hole in the parchment. And this is a question to Abigail Quant. Is the tear possibly original in the hole? Because if it is, then he doesn't have to guess a word there, right? A letter there, because the scribe would have just jumped over the hole. After the pseudo-color images came out, it was much easier to read. And then on Friday, April the 13th, I got this email. In a couple of months, the first intellectual fruits of our labour will be published together with a complete transcription of one crucial side of one page, most of which is unknown to modern science. I send you the final lines of the article as it stands in draft form. It is understated. It reads as follows. To sum up then, the new reading from Archimedes' indivisibles proof, which is method 14, should call for some reconsideration of the position of Archimedes in some key areas of the history of mathematics, especially the two related conceptual fields of the calculus and of infinity. So, you know, I don't normally speak to mathematicians, and this makes me deeply uncomfortable. And the work has been published, before I try and explain it, in Sciamus too. Sciamus is Latin, you can translate it as we know, which is rather funny because it has a circulation of about 10. We don't really know at all. It's written by 3 scholars, Reviel Metz, Ken Sato, and Natalie Chernetska, and it's read by 5 because Natalie Chernetska's not married. I mean, it's a very, very, very obscure article. Nonetheless, as I understand it, Archimedes is trying to work out the volume of a very peculiar shape, which is rather typical of Archimedes, and it's about it's sort of the shape of a fingernail, and he does it by slicing things up, and he slices things up with the implication of ad infinitum, which is what we know. But the way he does this, he has to draw a parallel between 2 sets of lines that he slices up, and he says that they are equal in magnitude, and you're not going to mention the magnitude. They're equal in magnitude, and he does so in such a way that he seems to understand that other things that can be of infinite size can actually be of different magnitudes. So he's rather sophisticated in that way. So that's the learned article. The other thing is that the press got wind of this. The Sunday Times Magazine, the Eureka page, exclusive. It's just a few lines of scrawled Greek text, but new technology has identified the hand of Archimedes and the results are rewriting history. I'm a great advocate for this project, but I wouldn't actually say that myself. But the interesting thing about the press is that it was through the press that Archimedes found his friends. And one of my jobs is sort of gatekeeper, because everyone says, I'm a friend of Archimedes, and I try and work out, you know, who can really help. Often I'm performing a social service. There, dear, thank you very much. But now the Stomachion, only one page of the Stomachion exists. And we know from Arabic sources that and it's very, very hard to read. no one really knew what Archimedes was going on about with the Stomachion. But we know from Arabic sources that the Stomachion concerns a square. And this square is made up of 14 pieces, the proportions of which are fixed. You can't mess around with the shapes. And how can this be an interesting mathematical problem? So you've got 14 bits in a square, and you can play with them in infinite varieties of ways. So what is it that Archimedes is going on about? And Rediscovery came up with an idea that was based on some work that Caballero Cervi had done in Italy and on reading the pseudo-color images. And he thought that what Archimedes was doing was working out how many ways you could recombine the bits in that square and still make a perfect square. And the trouble is, we only have the first page of the treatise, so we don't know that Archimedes got it right, and we don't know what the number was. I can tell you that Archimedes got it right, but we still don't know what the number was. So, is this something that even Archimedes could hypothetically do? So we got a computer guy called Bill Cutler in one room to work out an algorithm on a computer to find out how many ways you could recombine it. And we got a combinatoricist called Percy Diaconis, who's a MacArthur Award winner, and he's famous for, apparently, for pointing out that when you flip a coin, it doesn't turn up 50% one side, 50% the other. 51% of the time, it turns up on it lands on the side in which you flipped it. So remember that when you're looking after your kids in Little League. It's really going to give you an edge. And you put one in one corner and one in another. And this is one stage in the process. There's the original thing. And these are 536 solutions. And this is the beginning. These are 536 families. There are actually 17,152 ways in which you can recombine those bits and still make it a perfect square. And suddenly, this is not a game anymore, because this is the earliest study in combinatorics in the history of Western mathematics. And that's rather fun. Now, those of you that were paying attention, when I said that the palimpsester palimpsested those books, there were 7 books, and no one had given the other books much attention. You couldn't read them. This is Natalie Chernetska, who was doing her PhD on Greek palimpsest practices in Cambridge. You can find a PhD doing anything if you look hard enough. And we asked her to look at what else was in the book, of the other things. We took images of all the pages. And then on the 19th of October 2002, I got this email. Dear Will, in the course of further exploration of the non-Archimedes folios, I recently deciphered the text of a Greek orator unknown otherwise. I could identify parts of lost speeches by Hyperides. Now, Hyperides sounds like a joke, but he's not a joke. He's one of the 10 canonical orators of antiquity. He was an exact contemporary of Demosthenes and Aristotle. He wrote 77 speeches, none of which survived, until 1848, when we found some papyrus fragments in Thebes, in Egypt, and another set in 1897. But Hyperides never made it into the Christian school curriculum, so he never made it into the book format. And this is the only Hyperides ever to have been found in a book. And you can tell the difference between Archimedes and Hyperides because Archimedes is in just in one column. Hyperides is in just in one column, the Archimedes is in 2. And there are 2 speeches in here, one of which is Hyperides defending himself against the charge of treason following the Battle of Chaeronea, when Alexander the Great and Philip of Macedon beat up Athens and Thebes, because Hyperides was advocating that Athens and Thebes fight Alexander the Great, which is not a good idea. And so he was tried, and he defended himself, and he got let off. And he lived until 323 BC when when the Macedonians finally tracked him down. They cut out his tongue and they killed him. So here is Hyperides speaking again, frankly. It's 1/3 of the Hyperides corpus. It's a wonderful thing. And it's a companion speech to a great speech by Demosthenes called De Corona, when Demosthenes was in the same boat. So now, palimpsesting is a rather. There are lots of palimpsests in the world. There's normally a very good reason to palimpsest books. They're boring. So the number of really interesting palimpsests is really rather few. Some are really crucial, like Cicero's Republic. That is extant solely from one palimpsest, which is great. There are fragments of Euripides and that sort of thing. But important palimpsests are rare. So to find 2 important palimpsests in one book is sort of bizarre. This is all published now. And then in 2005 I got an email from Nigel Wilson. Dear Will, excellent news. The hard drive and photos came safely this week. At first glance, suggest there's no more Hyperides, but several leaves of a philosophical text, on one of which I read the name Aristotle clearly enough. Now, clearly for Nigel Wilson isn't clearly for the rest of us, but it's along here, and with our pseudo-color images, it's down here. And there it is. So what was 2 people trying to read these texts suddenly turned into, and I'm not joking, 100. And what was a rather mum-and-pop operation became a small industry. People all over the world were working on this. So we set up a website, and if you're a member of the general public, all you see is the general discussion, where you can join a string of various people talking about Christianity versus science. But the real stuff was going on underneath. And here are scholars. This is trying to read Hyperides. So this is David Whitehead. This is from University of Belfast. This is Chris Carey from the University of London, trying to put these various texts together. Nigel Wilson and Bob Sharples working on the philosophical text. We sort of blew it up onto the big screen for Nigel. And the philosophical text, did I say this already? It turns out to be almost certainly a lost commentary on Aristotle's categories by somebody called Alexander of Aphrodisias in the 3rd century AD. And as far as I know, it's the first classical text to be put together by Wiki. Our techniques got better. This is the first page of the book. This is an iron map of the page. Now, when you take an X-ray, of course, you have 4 layers of text, right? Because you have the text on the front and the text on the back, so it's really very, very difficult to read. But finally, after 7 years of looking, one of the first things you do when you've got a medieval manuscript is to find something called the colophon. And the colophon tells you, maybe it'll tell you who wrote it, maybe it'll tell you where they wrote it, maybe it will tell you when they wrote it. And it's an absolute manuscript basic. Look for the colophon. So it was 7 years, and goodness knows how much money before we found the colophon, rather embarrassingly at the bottom of page 1. And it says that this book was written by Johannes Myronas on the 14th of April, 1229. That's to say the prayer book. He's the guy who did the palimpsesting. We don't know who wrote the Archimedes text. But on the 14th of April, 1229, Johannes Myronas finished making his prayer book. And we know from the prayers, because the prayers are specific to the Jerusalem rite, so we know that Johannes Myronas was doing this in Jerusalem. The 14th of April 1229 is approximately 8 weeks after Frederick II's Stupor Mundi liberated Jerusalem from Muslim control. So this is a time where you don't have the social and political infrastructure to slaughter a whole load of goats and make a whole new book. This is a time where you grab books off the shelves of arcane matter, you scrape them off, and you write a prayer book to save your soul, which is what he did. And he finished it on the 14th of April, 1229, because in 1229, the 14th of April was Easter Saturday. It was a day where you finished books and gave them away. So we transcribed the texts. They're in dumb word format, no good. So we have students from Holy Cross and from Furman University turning it into TEIP5 compliant XML, which you can transform as you like, but there's a transformation of some. We have a lot of data. This is our data guide, Doug Emery. He's looking particularly excited because he's looking at something on his computer screen, and that's what he's looking at. We've published all this stuff on the web. You can, if you want to, go and find all of our images in all the raw data, and it's published under a Creative Commons copyright, which means that you can take this data and you can image process it yourself if you think that you can do better than us. And you can make money out of it. You can go and sell it too. It's not ours. It's really yours. The TEI has 3 elements. It has the Netz-Wilson transcription. It has the Heiberg transcription, so that you can compare the one to the other. And it's geospatially mapped, so that you can get it to the line on the page. And we've documented everything we've done thoroughly. So what was illegible, private, unviewable, expensive, fragile, unknown on the 29th of October 1998 in a book form is now available on your desktops for absolutely free. You can read it, you know what it says, you know that it's priceless, but it's free. And it's the oldest Google book in the world. And we're still processing. So, the man behind this has heart, brain, and a great deal of money. And that was us before treatment, and that's us now. Thank you very much.
A piece of Will, that was a spectacular talk. Why don't we all go down and party, a little libation, a little food, and talk to Will.